Guys, when it comes to SHTF, when the stuff hits the fan, there's a lot of people that have plans as preppers, and if you're watching this channel, you're at least interested in prepping. And prepping isn't necessarily the end of the world. It could be a personal SHTF. I could have a situation that I'm broke down on the side of the road with no phone, or my cell service is out. Or it can be an environmental situation or a storm, which is taking the power out, and how do I get through it? And that is the basis for prepping. But there's also a lot of indicators in the world right now that we could be facing some really serious grid down type situations. So today we're going to take a look at 16 inconvenient truths that can happen during a grid down situation. Really, the exercise and the benefit here is to look at these situations to see how prepared you are to face those situations and some possibilities of what to do if you find yourself in a grid down SHTF environment. So the first is there's going to be a lot of people out there that are emotional wrecks. They're not going to know what to do. They're going to panic. They're going to go into depression. They could even go into anger. And so we've got to be able to deal with that. But first, you need to deal with your own emotional weakness. And I think one of the big things about being prepared is you get yourself in a more stable situation. You kind of see when things start to go wrong, you have some plans. You can put those together. And I think that's one of the biggest things as far as what you can do for you and your family is to make them strong. And guys, talk about it. Don't hide it from your children. Now, you don't want to scare them to death. You want them to just know that you're doing things and you're putting some stuff together that if a problem happens, you know, dad's got it handled or mom's got it handled. And that will go really a long way in emotional stability. Guys, right now, if you take the cell phones away from most teenagers, they're going to all be an emotional wreck and they won't even know what to do. And in a grid down situation, that is a high probability. And so we need to start looking at getting people to think about situations that happen. Guys, if we had an EMP tomorrow, 90% of the country would be walking around in a daze not knowing what to do. And so make sure that you are emotionally strong, that you have a good mindset, that when things start to go wrong, you're like, okay, kind of thought this was going to happen. Let me go ahead and put a plan into place. Number two, out of shape. If you're out of shape, you're going to have a really hard time. Some people are going to be overweight, which is going to hinder their mobility. People that, just have lacked strength because, guys, we are in a very soft world. And a lot of us work in offices and we do things and we don't have the stamina. So one of the things that you really need to do first off is to get in a good exercise program just for your own personal health, whether it's an SHTF situation or not. But the stronger that you are physically, the better you're going to be able to deal with things. One of the things, though, about being a little overweight is you're going to have a little extra padding and cushion when it comes to being without food. So there is some advantages, but one of the problems is a lot of times when you're overweight, you're dealing with health issues as well and being able to get around. So go ahead, guys, get yourself into shape. Make sure whether you're just walking up the street on a daily basis or you're going and you're working out and you're getting your cardio really up. And those things are very important. One thing that we've gotten into is karate again, and we're doing Kempo. And so twice a week we go and we train. And it's really helped me to get a lot more physically strong, emotionally and mentally strong. And also the benefit is that I can defend myself even better. So find what's good for you, get involved in some kind of sport. Again, if it's just walking, it's better than just sitting around. Chronic illness, what are you going to do? You know, if you've got something that really hinders you, that affects your life on a daily basis, and you're dependent on medical attention, what is a backup? And one thing that I would recommend first off is to start looking at health alternatives, home remedies, things like that, and to see if it can give you some relief. Because guys, if there is no medical help, and we could still have a hospital that could be completely overrun. And so you need to make sure to take care of yourself. Guys, your health is honestly your responsibility. And doing whatever you can. Obviously, there are things that some of us can't help. It's just what it is. But what are you going to do if you can't get that help? What is going to help you to get through it? Some of us, very dependent on medications to live. Are there alternatives? Are there health remedies? And we should be really examining that, doing research and figuring this out. Because unfortunately, if things go south and you have diabetes, insulin really is probably your only hope. And so being able to figure out, how do I keep myself as healthy as I can for as long as I can? Medications, I mean, that's a big one. A lot of people depend on medications for various reasons. Some with chronic illnesses, but some with mental health issues. Where is that going to lead you next? There's so many different things that we use for medications, and a lot of us just on a daily basis. It may be Advil, it may be Imodium, it may be Tylenol, it could be sinus medication, flu and cold. Make sure you stock up on those things. But guys, overall, do research again and find out remedies, home remedies, healthy remedies that can get you through those situations. They may not be quite as good as far as getting rid of the symptoms for some medication, but at least it'll give you some relief. And so be ready, have a good bag or a good pantry set up or a medicine cabinet with a lot of the medications that you're going to be needing. The elderly or those older people that have limited mobility, when you get to that point to where you're really dependent on others. Number one, what are you going to do if you find yourself in that situation? Number two, what are you going to do if you have people that depend on you because of that situation, because they're just older? And having some plans put aside, thinking things through, thinking if I need to get these people out of this house, or if I need to get myself and get down the road somewhere, or I have to have a bug out situation, can I make it? What am I going to do? What are some limitations? And what are some advantages that I can take? And start thinking these things through. I have parents that are in their 80s, they live next door to me, and we're taking care of them on an everyday basis. They're still able to get around and do, but if the grid goes down, it's going to get a lot tougher. And we have some things put back. We've thought some things through, making some plans. But guys, here's the thing. When you're making plans, you're just one step ahead. If you're not making plans, you're going to be behind the 8 ball from day one. Human waste, it's toxic. It attracts insects. It attracts disease. It causes the spread of disease. You have got to be able to take care of human waste. Going out into the woods and using the bathroom is not going to be a good situation. Flies, different animals get around there, and then they spread it to different areas. And so being able to take care of human waste. And guys, there's a lot of different remedies. Digging out latrines, being able to treat that with lime. A lot of people take cat litter and you put it in the bottom of a 5-gallon barrel and you put a bag in it and you do what you've got to do, and then you get rid of it and you bury it. But it's going to be important when you do bury waste material that it doesn't affect the water system. And so having these things kind of thought out. But guys, human waste, it can't stay. You have got to get rid of it because it can cause all kind of diseases and sickness. Household trash and garbage. That's one thing that you can't allow to pile up. It'll attract rodents, it'll attract, again, diseases. It needs to be taken care of. There's a number of things that you can do though. One thing is to bury a certain amount of trash. And then of course you can burn certain items. But one thing that you can also do is recycle. And some of the things that are not important today that are just waste, like tin cans that you have your soup, that could be a very vital part of your prepping. You could put those things back. Cardboard that you have that you're throwing away. One of the things though about waste and trash is that in a grid down situation, there's not as much coming in. And so really your trash signature is going to be a lot less than it would be in a modern day. I mean, when Amazon quits coming, you're not going to have all these boxes, you're not going to have all this waste material. But food, you can use it for composting if it's leftovers. You can feed your animals or pets with it. There are some different alternatives. But having a plan, thinking it through, what am I going to do with my trash? If you live in an urban environment, that is really going to be a big problem because there's so many people, there's so much trash, and some people just aren't going to care. But making sure that you have some alternatives to be able to take care of household trash, which goes right along with your human waste. And then next, really on the heels of both of those, is disease and plagues. With people being a lot less sanitary than they are before, a lot less clean, there are diseases that can spread, and especially if there's human waste and trash all around. And so this really can cause a pandemic or an epidemic. And guys, we need to keep ourselves really clean, keep your hygiene up. Again, with the other two, with human waste and trash, you've got to get rid of it. It's going to help keep disease down and to keep plagues down. And so being able to keep those sanitary conditions, guys, just because it's an SHTF situation doesn't mean that you can just be dirty and go dirty. Keep your hands washed, keep your body clean, wipe it down. Keep certain surfaces as clean as you can. Keep cooking utensils clean because those can create bacteria, mold, different things that can cause a lot of issue. Gasoline, guys, that's for your cars. And one of the things about gasoline is it doesn't store well. It runs out. And so it's one of the things that even if you have some gas stored up, typically about a year, even with fuel stabilizers, you're not going to have a long-term gasoline storage option. So figuring out ways that if I need a vehicle, what am I going to do after a year? And thinking these things through ahead of time. The other thing about storing up gasoline is it's really volatile. For me, and this is just an option that we use, is propane. Propane is very stable, it's sealed, it'll last for a long time. It doesn't really require a lot of special caution when you're storing it up. There is some, but definitely one of those that's the most stable. And you can heat your home, you can actually cook with it. I mean, you can run a propane generator. Propane gives you a lot of options, and again, it stores for a long time. So while it won't necessarily run your car, it will definitely give you a lot of options. Now, there are those that have electric cars, and you're going to even be in worse shape because it takes diesel generators and all kind of other electrical devices to keep those pumps and those charging stations going. And that's one of the big problems with your electrical vehicles. Water filters, sooner or later, they're going to run out. Your municipal water or whatever water that you use, if you have a well, that's great, and you want to have a hand pump. But being able to filter your water, if you're getting it from an open source, a creek, a lake, a pond, your pool, being able to use that water, yes, but is it full of Giardia and Cryptosporidium that will either make you super sick or it'll kill you? And we've got to have water. Water is, in the rule of threes, you can only live 3 days without water. And so you really need to consider, what are my other options? And one of the big ones that is probably the most long-lasting is to boil your water. Now, one of the problems is it doesn't remove sediment, and it doesn't necessarily remove the odor or the taste of water that's not so pure. And so that is just one of the things that you will drink regardless. But having some sort of large pot, a big pot that you can boil water in, because you're going to want to be able to boil quite a bit. You don't want to just have a little small pot or have 5 of them on an open flame to be able to collect water. So get yourself a really big pot with the handles, and you can boil, 3 or 4 gallons of water at one time. And so that's just going to help things out. You may not ever use that pot for anything else. Maybe for boiled peanuts or maybe making a big stew. But once a grid down situation happens, having a big pot like that can be very useful for a number of different reasons. Toilet paper, we saw it during COVID-19. It blew right off the shelves, and a lot of people were really struggling during that time. But toilet paper will be gone over time altogether. And so having some alternatives, unfortunately, we don't still have the Sears Roebuck huge catalog they used to send out every year. And newspapers are gone. We get a lot of our information digitally. And so having some sort of way to be able to keep yourself clean, because that goes right back to getting rid of human waste and trash, is that it creates an unsanitary situation. So definitely think through, what would I use if I don't have toilet paper? Having a garden's great, and you should be getting your garden going if you don't have one. If you have seed put back and you haven't even started a garden, there's a lot of enemies to your garden. There's the deer and rabbits and just your normal rodents that come into your garden, but there's also tons of insects, and then there is just blight and different problems and diseases that happen. And the more experience you have with gardening, the more you know how to deal with these situations. But typically gardens are too small. So you need to think about, do I have seed? Do I have heirloom type seed that will produce seed later on that I can replant? and to be able to have some sort of food source coming in. So guys, plan out your garden. I mean, it's spring right now. It's a great time, if you haven't already, get a garden going, get it moving, and then think about how can I expand that garden if I need to. Which really leads to the next is game will be gone. Deer, we see them all the time. They're running across the road, different type animals, squirrel, rabbit, you name it. There's a ton of stuff out there. But just like in the Great Depression, a lot of the game animals almost went extinct because people just went out and hunted, and they hunted for food. In the population we have today, it could completely decimate not only our game animals, but dogs and cats and everything else. People will be desperate. And so one of the other issues with hunting during an SHTF situation is there's going to be a lot of people out there competing. And there's a lot of gunfire, a lot of bullets going in every direction. So, it's a dangerous situation just in itself. But if you're relying on game, unless you live way out in the middle of nowhere, there is a threat to your food source if that's what you're depending on. Firewood, especially in some areas, firewood's going to get gone in a hurry. Over the years, when they've had wars, especially during World War II, there's a lot of scenes where people were actually burning their own furniture just to stay warm, taking every scrap of wood that was anywhere around. And then if you're in an urban situation, you may not even have that option to be able to have a fire because there may not be a place for it. So think about your firewood, think about alternatives, and guys, just make a plan. One thing about an urban situation in the middle of winter is going to be to just get out of Dodge. And there's going to be a lot of issues that go on in those situations anyway. Infant mortality is going to definitely increase. My wife was a labor and delivery nurse for over 20 years. And there were very few times that they lost a baby. With modern medicine, most things are taken care of. But if you're having a baby at home, there are people that do it all the time, but you need to know some things about it. And hygiene and sanitary conditions are one of the most important. It can affect the mom and the baby. And so having some knowledge ahead of time, guys, you may have a daughter that's pregnant. You and your wife are not having children, but you may have a next door neighbor that's pregnant or gets pregnant. And being able to take care of that is going to be important. And having some plans put ahead if you do. Number 16, and I saved this one for last, is cannibalism. It's a very inconvenient truth, but we've seen it over the years in history where survival situations have turned into cannibalism for people just to survive. And typically it was those that had already passed on. But it could be a hunting type situation, especially with the volume of populations that we have now compared to any other time in history. And when you have no food and people are looking for food source, that could definitely be a situation. And so, number one, being able to protect yourself from cannibals. Number two, not getting yourself involved in that endeavor. And so, preparing now to get your food supplies, think it through. You want to have a replenishable food supply. So gardening is definitely one of them. Game. You can husbandry where you raise goats and chickens and rabbits and all the different things that, can be used as a food source. And also they can be bartered with. So there's a lot of things that you can kind of do to prepare yourself. But in the general scheme of things, it's one thing you want to be aware of and you want to be careful of. And, guys, again, it's something horrible to think about, but it's definitely possible. So guys, these are inconvenient truths. They're things that can and will happen in a grid down situation according to the severity of what's going on. Short term, a lot of this stuff is not necessarily going to be, as important, but over a long-term period where it actually becomes a way of life, these are things that you may have to deal with. One of the things, though, too, is over time, people seem to get in some grooves. They get back to normal. And when they do, things start to kind of level out. People start to coexist, and they help each other, and they do for one another. And so, it's good to be able to identify these things as possibilities, but not to lose hope and that things can turn back, maybe not to where they are today, but they can be very acceptable, and honestly, they may be very enjoyable. To get back a little more to the basics of life and just to enjoy the gift of life. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.